Hello, BookTube. This is Weekly Reads. I've had a very good and productive reading week. And a lot of what I have read has given me food for thought that I would like to turn into discussion videos, but don't hold your breath because every time I try to make a discussion video, it does not work out for me. Anyway, let's start with the first thing I read this week, and that is From the New World by Jorie Graham. This is a selection of Jorie Graham's poetry from 1976 to 2014. I think there is a more recent selected collection of her work that came out maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And certainly there is a selected collection that came out 20 years prior to this collection, Dream of the Unified Field, which I have in my collection and is one of my favorite collections of poetry. So I enjoyed my reading of this collection. On the whole, I especially enjoyed the earlier parts of this collection that overlapped with Dream of the Unified Field. I did enjoy the more recent poems, the poems leading from 1994 to 2014, as much as the 76 to 1994. But again, I really enjoyed reading this collection, and it has me wondering whether I should make an effort to collect Jorie Graham's individual collections of poetry, or if I should just stick with collecting her in selected or collected editions. And that kind of has led me to think about a collection that I read last week, Negative Blue by Charles Wright, and also Robert Duncan, who I read a poem from yesterday for Poetry Thursday, and also short stories. So I think there's some discussion that I want to have that I would like to think about and maybe try to do. So after I read From the New World, I reread 3 plays, starting with Thornton Wilder's Our Town, Saturday afternoon. Our Town is, I would argue, one of the greatest plays of the American theatrical canon. It is set at the turn of the 20th century in a small town in southern New Hampshire called Grover's Corners. The play is about the elder children of 2 prominent families. George Gibbs is the elder child of the town doctor, Doc Gibbs, and his wife, who is a Mrs. Gibbs, who's a homemaker who would love nothing more than to see her husband finally take a vacation. There is a younger child, Rebecca. Next door is Emily Webb. Her father is the editor of the town paper, and her mother is also a homemaker. She has a younger sibling, Wally. The play is about their friendship, their eventual falling in love and marriage, and the end of their relationship. As well as touching on other aspects of the town. The play is also meta-theatrical. A recurring or prominent figure throughout the play is the stage manager, who serves as the play's narrator. And so Our Town knows that it's a play. And the staging is very minimal. There is only a few chairs, a table, and some ladders. That work for the whole of the town. And so various actions are mimed by the performers. And Mr. Webb is asked to break character, to address the audience about the town, and actors are embedded in the audience to ask questions of Mr. Webb and other characters. And so every time I reread this play, and I have read it several times, I love the experience. I love this play. And the final act just brings me to tears every time I read it. It is just heartbreaking, and I love it. On Sunday, I started with a reread of The Night of the Iguana by Tennessee Williams. The Night of the Iguana is set in 1940 on the western Mexican coast. Lawrence Shannon is a former priest who has become a tour guide for increasingly cheap tourist agencies. He is leading a tour group composed of teachers from a women's college in Texas, and he has gone off the itinerary and has also raped the youngest member of the group. And he is on the verge of a mental break. So he retreats to a hotel run by his friends, the Falks. When he arrives, he discovers that Maxine Falk has recently lost her husband, and so she's running the hotel on her own. And so he asks her to take in his tour group, who are having none of it justifiably because they are very justifiably angry at Shannon. Also at the hotel are a group of German tourists and eventually a traveling artist and her grandfather, who seek accommodation and hope to be able to make a little money while they're there. And so over the course of the play, which takes place over the course of a few hours, Shannon has his breakdown, and Maxine and Hannah, the artist, sort of contend over him and eventually work a temporary bandaging of his problems. Although, like with much of Tennessee Williams' work, I think he focuses on a discrete moment of crisis that has an ambiguous resolution that is perhaps at the end just a bandaging of the problem, that there is no this problem is solved. It's a very temporary fix, I think, quite often. So I enjoyed my reread of this finally. I picked this play up a few years ago because I was on a mid-century American drama kick, and it's taken me 2 reread attempts to finally reread it, and I'm very happy about that. I think Night of the Iguana isn't one of Tennessee Williams' best plays. I think it's kind of like the next level down. It is really good, but it's not The Glass Menagerie or A Streetcar Named Desire or even Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. So as far as setting is concerned, because I guess that's sort of a theme I wanted to touch on with these 3 plays, is The Night of the Iguana has a more elaborate set than Our Town does. But it's a more confined setting. It's just the veranda space of this hotel with three room doors. And so going to different parts of the hotel or down to the beach or down to the bus, the characters are going off stage. But one thing I was thinking about with Shannon as I was reading this, and then thinking back about my reading of Kind on a Hot Tin Roof, is to what extent Williams wants the audience to sympathize or be critical of his protagonists, and whether or not that has changed over time. Would a reader in the 1960s necessarily, or theater goer in the 1960s, necessarily interpret Shannon the same as a reader today, who, I myself view him very much as an entitled piece of shit who is a predator. Whether he's just a predator. So that was, something that I kind of want to think a bit more about. So moving on to the final play that I read, The Women by Clare Boothe Luce. So The Women is set in the late 20s, early 1930s in New York, and is about a socialite named Mary Haynes, who, due to her friend Sylvia Fowler's machinations, discovers that her husband Stephen is having an affair with a perfume counter girl named Crystal Allen. For much of the play, Mary Haynes is uncertain what to do, but she is ultimately manipulated by Sylvia into divorcing her husband and regretting that decision. I enjoyed this reread of The Women. It's been a very long time since I last read it, about 20 years. And what I noticed about this play, outside of course, this is a bit more traditional of a play. There are discrete scene breaks in the acts, and also this setting, the staging is more elaborate than either Night of the Iguana or certainly Our Town. But one thing I noticed is, honestly, as much as I enjoyed this reread, I think the movie is much better. And by that I mean the 1939 adaptation by George Cukor, starring Norma Shearer, Joan Crawford, and Rosalind Russell. And one part where I think the movie is a lot better is that it does cut one of Mary's children. So The Women is composed solely of women. There are no living male cast members. The men are referenced to, but they are ghosts. They exist only off stage. And in the play, Mary has two children, Little Mary and Little Stephen. And I think the play doesn't really know what to do with Little Stephen, because there's a point where the decision to divorce has been made, and Mary is explaining to her children that she is divorcing their father. However, since there are no male cast members, Little Mary is the only one told. And so Little Stephen, who is the younger child, is sort of neglected. He's like punted off and disappears. And of course, at the end of the play, it's like, where the hell is he? So the movie makes the right decision in just cutting him. Now, maybe if little Stephen were the older sibling and was off at boarding school or something, that would have worked. Because, like, he's away from the action. But as the younger sibling, you would think they would be told together. So, wise decision to cut little Stevie. Also, I think the movie does a better job at the resolution. I don't think the resolution of the play itself quite works, whereas the movie does work a lot better. So, I enjoyed it, but certainly the movie is better. And so, finally, the last thing I read this week was Beloved by Toni Morrison. This is a novel that examines the aftermath of slavery. So the novel is set in 1873 and 1874 Cincinnati. Sitha is a former slave who, when she escaped slavery, murdered her elder daughter. So, to pretty much spoil the reveal, in the early 1850s, Sitha was bought by a plantation in Kentucky called Sweet Home because one of the slaves on the plantation, Hallie, managed to build enough money to buy his mother, Baby Suggs, freedom. And so she was moved to Cincinnati, where she lives. And Sitha was bought to replace her. And Sitha and Hallie begin a relationship. They have 4 children. And it's around the time that she's pregnant with her 4th child that the plantation gets a new, I don't know what the hell school teacher is. Somehow this monster called school teacher takes over the plantation. And he is evil. And so the slaves of the plantation plan a mass escape. And in the first wave of the break, Sitha's older children manage to escape to Baby Suggs. And the older slaves are captured and killed or sold. And Sitha is brutalized. And so she makes a second escape attempt, which is successful, and she makes it to Baby Suggs with her 4th child newly born, thanks to the help of a character named Amy Denver. A month after Sitha arrives, school teacher catches up with her and plans to bring her back to Sweet Home. However, Sitha takes her children to a woodshed and tries to kill them. And she successfully kills the older daughter and nearly succeeds with her sons, her older children, but is prevented from killing her youngest, Denver. And so Sitha is imprisoned and eventually released, and gradually the house that they live in becomes haunted by the spirit of the murdered child, whose headstone only has Beloved on it. At the beginning of the novel, the 2 older boys have long run away, and baby Suggs has long died. So it's only Sitha and Denver living at the house when a former slave of Sweet Home's, Paul D, arrives, and he and Sitha begin a relationship. And he drives out the ghost of the baby. However, after they go to a carnival, a young woman calling herself Beloved is waiting for them at the house. And slowly, after she's been invited in, she insinuates herself into Sitha and Denver's lives. And is this young woman the reincarnation, the physical manifestation of the baby? Is she something else? And so that's largely the setup for Beloved. And it is amazing. I really enjoyed it. Particularly sections in the middle where Beloved's influence on Sitha and Denver is becoming more solidified and more haunting. And then the ending where Denver comes into her own, and the exorcism at the end. It is just, those are really amazing moments. So I really enjoyed reading Beloved finally. That said, I don't know if I would rank it as highly as a lot of other readers would. And I think that is certainly another discussion to be had. What exactly is meant by greatness? And is calling something great giving it a certain sort of associations that the book might not necessarily be able to live up to? And I'm thinking of this not just maybe for Beloved, but also like Shakespeare, who is often called the greatest poet, the greatest playwright in English. And yet, I've never really seen that. So that's another discussion video I would like to make. But anyway, I did really enjoy Beloved. So I had a very good reading week. So what will I be reading this coming reading week, starting today? So today and over the weekend and into next work week, I will be rereading The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. This is a novel about an agricultural family living in Oklahoma whose farm is repossessed during the Dust Bowl, and they migrate to California in hope of a new life, which doesn't turn out well for them. And I will be reading the collected poems of Sylvia Plath. And I think that probably will be all I'll be able to get to this coming week. Because I don't think the last picture show, so if I have enough time, I might try the last picture show, but for sure that and the Adventures of Huckleberry, no, it's just Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, I'll get to the next week. And then if I have some extra time, I'll find something to read that I haven't quite come up with. But I'm very happy how July has progressed. I pretty much read everything in my reading plan, so that's really good. Anyway, BookTube, I will sign off for now, and I hope everybody has a good rest of your Friday and a good weekend. And I will see you next week for some videos.